Hey guys, I'm going to share my knowledge about Linux booting with you. When you press the power button of your computer, what had it done in 3 or 5 seconds before your Linux started? Now let's take a look. Okay, let's stop here, because after that you will continue loading the Linux kernel into your memory. And in such a few seconds, the computer has done 3 things. The first thing is post, power on self-test. In this test, the computer will check the CPU, how many CPUs set up on the board, and initialize them, then check the memory. Is the memory connected to the bus? How many available memory space we got? Then check the I/O such as the mouse, the keyboard, the video display, and network devices, blah blah blah. Generally, the last thing to do is scanning the medias, floppies, CD-ROM, hard disks, USB storages, to look for bootable media. This process is done by loading the data of the very first sector of the media. Check whether the last 2 bytes is 5588. 5588 is a flag that means this media is bootable. You may know that one sector consists of 512 bytes. The BIOS loaded to the memory at 0007C00, then execute the code. Now we talk about the second thing, the MBR. It's the master boot record, where generally every hard disk has an MBR. It stores the partition table of the whole disk and also located at the very first sector of the disk. Due to historical issues, there are at most 4 partition entries in this table. In Windows, you may call them JCDE. In Linux, we call them HDA1 to HDA4, or SDA1 to SDA4 if you have a SCSI controller. One way to solve this problem is to use the data of one entry as an extended table, in which we can have another 4 partition entries. So in Windows, we may have drive A to Z. However, in Linux, it starts from SDA1. The number is unlimited. The last thing is grub. Grand Unified Bootloader. Grub is the bootloader used by Linux. There are 3 parts in grub. We call them 3 stages. Stage 1 is the so-called very first 512 bytes. The program of this stage is used for detecting file system in your media. Stage 1.5 are the file system related programs. If your file system is extended-fs, the extended-fs program will be loaded in stage 1. Stage 2 is a manual program used to select different operating systems to start, and it also supports a rescue console for manually loading the kernel image. Now I will manually load the Linux kernel from the hard disk to show the detailed process of how to boot Linux. The first thing is to make the Linux partition as a root. Then we select the Linux kernel. We use the command Linux. And then we tell the kernel the root is SDB is my USB hard disk. VM Linux, VM stands for virtual memory. Z represents that it is a compressed file. And then we use the init RD to initialize the RAM disk. And last, use grub to boot Linux.